Good morning and best wishes to all of us. Thank you very much to Miss Majah-Leah V Ravego, PhD, right,
Yeah.
Miss? Okay, from Ateneo de Manila University for her willingness to be a speaker in a guest lecture this morning with the topic Energy, Sustainable Development and Disaster Risk Management. And whom we respect, Mr. Rumaya PhD, as the moderator of the guest lecture this morning. And all audience who we love and we are proud of. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to come and give sharing session to guest lecture today. So now maybe Mr. Rumaya as moderator will read the research person's CV, which will immediately be followed by a guest lecture material presentation. By the so to Mr. Rumaya as the moderator, time and place is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our guest lecture today. The theme of our guest today is Energy, Sustainable Development, and Disaster Risk Management. I just got some latest update that today we'll be talking mostly about disaster risk management. And we are very pleased to have our lecture, our guest lecture today, Dr. Professor at Academic Department of I'm very sorry, Dr. Maha, if I make a mistake, maybe you can correct the pronunciation later. We very interesting. A brief with Dr. He was program director in 2014-2018 USAID Grant Energy Policy and Development Program (EPDP). Her research interests include development economics, resource economics, energy economics, and the economics of natural disasters. She has published papers on electricity economics, resource management and sustainability, climate change, agriculture, and experimental games. She served as the president of the Philippine Economic Society in 2018. I think that's all. Many things. He got his PhD in economics from University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he finished his master and bachelor degree in University of Philippines. I think that's I can give. Maha, and Dr. Maya, the time is yours.
Let me share my screen. Okay, do you see it? Okay, thank you again. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and meet you all. Okay, let me fix the screen. Okay. I will be talking mostly about the economics of disaster. I will be talking about the three levels: the macro economy, at the meso level, and then at the micro level. I'll try to leave some time for the question and answer at the end, but if you would like to ask some clarificatory questions, it's also welcome to interrupt me. This would be the outline of the presentation this morning. I'll talk about a little bit about how natural hazards can turn or elevate into disasters. And then with regards to the macroeconomy, we'll connect economic growth and disasters. And then the meso part, this is at the middle. We have a study on local government units. And then the last part would be the microeconomy or at the household level. I will be sharing with you our studies mostly on the Philippines, but as earlier, Rumaya is saying that the Philippines and Indonesia are sharing similarity and even in geographical location. So the Philippines and also Indonesia by its geographical location, the country is prone to natural events of extreme intensity. So I'm calling it natural events or natural hazards. From 2011 to 2018, the Philippines ranked third after Vanuatu and Tonga in the World Risk Index. And in 2019, the Philippines registered an improvement, ranking number 9. Okay, so disasters can turn into natural or natural hazards can turn into disaster. This happens when local response capacity is limited. Natural hazards can easily elevate into disasters and take a toll in the economy. So if natural hazard happens in the Pacific and nobody is hurt, that's just a natural hazard. But if it affected, the local community or the country, then we now call it a natural disaster. The purist doesn't want to call it natural disaster because they're saying that there's no natural about disaster. So the correct way, according to the purist researcher, it's a disasters due to natural hazards. So I guess you would be able to relate with this map here in the Philippines. We experience about 18 to 20 typhoons every year. The highest incidence, of course, here in the upper portion of the country. Flooding occurs in a number of regions in Western Visayas. This is in the middle. And then volcanic eruptions, the highest incidence would be in Bicol region. So I don't know if you've heard about Mayon volcano. Okay, now, what is the state of the arts in disaster management or the science of disaster management? If you scan the literature, you'll read papers that are attempting to identify based on the downside, meaning they are studying what happened when the disaster occurred without proper attention to the upside. Because a extreme or natural hazard, we cannot predict them, right? It may or may not happen, but typically most of the studies focus when it already happened. So it's already the downside without proper attention to the upside. The upside meaning when the government and the people are preparing for the coming of a disaster. So most of the studies fails to fully account for interdependencies between the many instruments of risk management and coping. One study noted that the field of disaster management is ad hoc and full of ambiguities. So that's why what is needed is a coherent framework for integrating risk reduction and coping strategies, meaning we're trying to minimize the risk associated with disaster and how do we cope, what are the activities that we do. So allowing for the upside as well as the downside. Okay, so it's very complex because there is uncertainty at every stage. I will show you a figure in the next slide. What is this every stage that we're talking about, or the uncertainty in every stage? We need to know the probabilities of the various states of the world. States of the world meaning whether the disaster will occur or not. And what the benefits of all the interdependent actions, meaning the actions that you do in each stage will affect the outcome of the next stage. So here is Einstein saying everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Translating this to economic terms, we just follow the well-known tenet in economics, which is the marginal expected benefit of each action should be equal at all levels. So here is the our attempt in unifying this framework. Okay, the nature here, the event here gives the probability distribution of weather events. So we can call this climate. It can probably be changed by global actions, meaning all countries doing the mitigation. But if only one country is doing something, then it may be negligible. So we start here. Public and private sector select the initial adaptation actions. So this could be putting zoning, land zoning, putting up seawalls or dikes beside sea or river, flood control projects. So all of these activities would lower the probability distribution, let's say, over the extent of flooding. So at this point here, depending on what actions you do at this level, that will affect the potential exposure of the population. Whether you did zoning or not, if you did not do zoning, for sure, there will be a lot of people that will be exposed to, let's say, flooding. So that's the idea. Whatever you do in the previous stage will affect the nature or potential exposure at the succeeding stage. Okay, and then public sector here, once the disaster has arrived, public sector, okay, can deploy early warning, such as I'm sure most countries have the national weather station that tell us whether what intensity a storm coming our way. And social media, Facebook and Twitter, they are also playing a role in providing warning system to the people. Now, people respond. Depending on how people respond to the warning, that would then affect, okay, this nature that would determine the damage, the number of death, injury, distress. Because you are already given a warning and you still did not leave, let's say, the coastal area. So there's a high risk that you will be killed, right? Because you're in the danger zone, okay? And then we go to the relief. This is again public and private efforts to deal with injury and distress. And in this case, vulnerability is a characteristic of the resulting distribution. So we can only say the vulnerability of the population depending on the actions that we did previously in the previous stage. So these actions, these are the risk management and coping strategies. Okay, and then nature again determine the damages. This would already include the stock, like the infrastructure, and then depending on how long the economy or the household can start to bounce back. This is where the rebuilding and rehabilitation. If you are familiar with the Yolanda, the most intense disaster that has hit the Philippines, this was in, if I'm not mistaken, 2013. The rebuilding and rehabilitation is still ongoing. And then finally, we'll have this resilience. So this is the where nature selects from the final distribution and you get the outcome. So this is the outcome that we want. So we want as much as possible for the household, for the local government units, and for the economy to be resilient. So this is the overarching framework of my discussion at the macro, meso, and micro level. So let me start with the macro. So we're connecting economic growth and disaster. Any questions so far before I go to the macro level? Are we good? I hope we are all on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
So let me just get my water. Okay, at the macro level, disaster or disaster risk management can also be a source of growth. We had this document, it's called Ambisyon Natin 2040, this is in Tagalog, but in English, it's a play of words between ambition and vision. So ambition is what you dream of. So this is by the year 2040. And then the vision is what you see in the future by year 2040. The National Economic Development Authority conducted a survey mainly among the youth who would have a stake in the economy by 2040. This was conducted before the pandemic. And now people are talking about maybe the ambition natin 2040 would be moved a little bit like 2050. So the result of the survey, said that most Filipinos would like a strongly rooted, comfortable, and secure life. So when the survey was done, we're looking at 2040. So it would span about 3 government administration. So this was finished before the current administration was installed. And then right now, or next year in May, we're going to have an election. So the current administration endorse this through the executive order, the ambition. So meaning it's very good because there will be continuity. So we are hoping that the next administration will also endorse this vision. What is this vision for 2040? This is in a nutshell what it means: a strongly rooted, comfortable, and secure life. In economic terms, to have that strongly rooted and comfortable and secure life, the GDP per capita has to grow to about $6,873 dollars from where it is today, which is just about 1,618. And then the GDP per capita has to grow about 5.96, at least 5.96 per year. This is a departure from the last 25 years, which is about 4%. And the gross domestic product has to grow about 7% per year for the next 25 years. This is attainable because we already did it in 2010 to 2015. But because of the pandemic, that's why this might be moved forward to 2050. The economy in 2020 registered a contraction, negative 9%. It's the lowest since World War II. So, but researchers and economists are saying that we can still reach Ambition 2040. Why is visioning important? Visioning up to 2040 affords decision makers with a perspective that can guide the choice of present responses, because a vision is something that you want to achieve. So it will be up to the different government administration how to operationalize reaching that vision. Okay. However, this GDP growth and GDP per capita growth, okay, this is just it ignores the environment. It's the usual the economy with households and firms. Okay, if we include the environment in this, it's the environomy. So because we're looking at up to 2040, so we are not only looking at the generation today, but also the different generations up to 2040. So we're looking at the intertemporal welfare, meaning the well-being of, in this case, the Filipino people over the years. So if we're looking at this intertemporal well-being, it should incorporate interlinkages within the total economic and environmental system, including efficiency over time, dynamic efficiency, and intertemporal equity. So in addition to the standard measure of economic indicators, the gross domestic product, we propose these 3 key indicators. Okay, it's the green national income, the total resource depletion and environmental degradation, meaning we have to take into account the environment that we're using as inputs to production. And then here, the comprehensive national income, where we're considering disaster risk management as another source of growth. Because when we were part of the team that crafted the background papers for this Ambition natin 2040. So we try to give a scenario, what would happen if there is just a business as usual, what we're doing right now, and then the long-term optimistic goals. Optimistic goals meaning we're going to reach the vision for the Philippines. So in this case, the business as usual is that the depletion of natural resources would be about 2% of national income by 2040. Optimistic scenario would be 0 by 2040. And then the degradation of the natural resource and environment, business as usual based on the data that we have for the Philippines, it's about 3% of the national income. And an optimistic scenario would be about 0.6% of the national income. So we did the simulation on what would happen. This would be the path, okay, of the resource depletion and environmental degradation. The red here would be the business as usual. And then the blue here would be where 0% of national income would be the depletion. And corresponding to the scenario with regards to resource and environmental degradation is the gross national income. So the gross national income here, if we manage, so the gross national income incorporates the environment, the resources, natural resources, and the environment. So if we manage the total depletion and degradation, it actually leads to a higher growth rate of the gross national income. So this is the blue line. It may seem small, but this is actually bigger in magnitude. So if we manage that depletion, okay, and then like the experience of the Philippines, the economy before Yolanda or the Typhoon Haiyan struck the country, the economic trajectory of the Philippines was looking very good. It was on the upward trajectory. And then Typhoon Haiyan, it's the super typhoon, struck, and easily a disaster can negate any economic gains or reforms that you had in the past. So it can go down depending on, so that happened in 2013. Economic and social impact of past disasters, we have several like Ondoy or Katsana, Pepeng and Pharma. The damage and losses is equivalent to 2.7% of GDP. Or in military expenditure, it's about 1.3% of GDP. Just to give a comparison or put in context, how big is this 2.7%? Okay, and here we're saying that if we improve disaster risk management, it can also be a source of growth. GDP does not really measure welfare, but of course we're still using it because it's facilitate comparability across countries. We need better measures, which is GNI and CNI, gross national income, that incorporates total degradation and depletion, and then the comprehensive national income. Improving environmental management can be a source of growth, and improving disaster risk management can be a source of growth. Getting rid of bad policies can also be a source of growth. So here is your the GNI, okay? If this is business as usual, it's lower. The comprehensive national income, if it's business as usual, it's also lower. But if you manage disaster risk management appropriately, it can be a source of growth, and your comprehensive national income would actually be higher. Okay, so that's the macro connecting economic growth and disaster. So it doesn't mean that that negation of a disaster in the economic development can be also a source of growth as long as we're managing the actions like I showed earlier in the framework. So if you're interested with the details of this study, it's published in this book, a chapter in this book. So this is available in Isaiah's. Okay, so that's the macro level. We now go to the meso level. Unless anybody has a question at the macro level, I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Maybe I just need some clarification. Maybe
Yes.
you're saying about how disaster can be source of growth. Are you talking about using disaster to give like what you call it fiscal policy, expansion policy, that kind of impact that you're talking about when you're talking disaster as source of growth?
It's actually disaster risk management as a source of growth, not disaster per se. So if we manage, because we know, especially Indonesia and the Philippines, right? We know more or less how many typhoons are coming. So we can invest, in high tech early warning system, because that really saves people when we are able to get them out of harm's way. So those kind of things. So if we manage them, it can be a source of growth, meaning when disasters strike, it will not negate the economic reforms that we have done in the past.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity to clarify. Okay, so this is now, we now go to Meso. Meso, because this is not national, but at the local level, local government units. I don't know if you have something similar. So these are the local officials that will go to that level. Do you have something like this in Indonesia?
Yes, we have a strong decentralization policy.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So like that.
Many studies compare Indonesian and Filipina in terms of decentralization too.
The decentralization, yeah. So this is the study that we did. So we're creating an index. So we're calling it Localized Disaster Risk Management Index. Because I'm sure even in Indonesia, not all municipalities, there are high income, low income, right? So they have different capability. So we're asking if the municipality is ready for the next disaster. The objective of this is to develop a index. Okay, it measures how well local government units, so LGUs for short, in the Philippines prepare for disaster. What we want is to make it easier, because the index captures in one number the ex-post and ex-ante risk management strategies that influence post-disaster outcomes. So again, these are the risk management ex-post, you do this after, and then ex-ante, you do it before. So like going back again to the framework I showed earlier, right? So this would influence disaster outcomes. So in this study, we did a survey at the local government units. So meaning, we interviewed the mayors. We have this disaster risk reduction management officer, which is under the office of the mayor. So these are the leader of the municipality. We investigated 8 shocks, both the hydrometeorological and including the volcanic related disaster. But in this part, we're going to focus on hydrometeorological hazards causing disaster. We have about 193 municipalities across the Philippines. We did a multi-level sampling. So this is nationally representative survey. So it's across the Philippines, and we have representative from the different risk municipality, the high risk and then the low risk. Remember, we're trying to attempt to study the downside as well as the upside of the different risk management and coping strategies. Let me just show you some pictures. Here you'll see, based on the pictures, these are different municipalities. Just looking at the picture, you will see that Marikina, this would be first-class municipality because they have this command center, very high-tech with all this. So Marikina is a city in Metro Manila. Okay, and then this one is Tacloban. This is where Typhoon Haiyan happens. So they transferred, I cannot show anymore, but they transferred their office at the top of the municipal building overlooking the bay, because they were saying so that they can see immediately when the tide is rising. Because it really, during the Yolanda or the Typhoon Haiyan, it really envelopes the whole area. And then this one is Bohol, Loon, Bohol. They just recently, when we did the survey, they just recently experienced an earthquake, but they are able to cope very well. In fact, they even helped Tacloban. Bohol, the earthquake in Bohol happened, I think, a few months not even a year in between when Typhoon Haiyan struck. So here, because of the earthquake, their provincial office was badly affected. So now their office, when we interviewed them, it's just a makeshift. This is what you see when there's a construction. It's just a square. So that's where we did the interview. So this one is relatively well off. This is in Leyte. This is the mayor. So this is the office of the mayor. Another one is Legazpi, Bohol. This is the Mayon volcano, because we wanted to see also what they are doing in terms of volcanic eruption. Okay, so we did the survey ourselves. So like in the picture, I was going to all those different municipality, but of course I also have my RA because I'm also teaching. So this is the survey instrument. It is again patterned to this one. Okay, we have the ex post and ex ante coping strategies. So we have several blocks. So this would be the different blocks of question. We ask them about the incidents and then the severity of the disaster that they have experienced, and the different ex post and coping strategies that they have developed. So this is the data that we obtained from the survey, where we're going to develop the index, the localized disaster risk management index. So when we ask them, it's defined as shock. So meaning we don't say what natural disaster did you experience. We ask them what is the shock. So the shock here is defined as unforeseen adverse event or disaster due to natural hazards that can lead to a decrease in welfare. And in creating this index, we focus on disasters caused by hydrometeorological hazards. So this would be the natural hazards or the disasters caused by strong winds and rain, flood, landslide, and big waves. These hydrometeorological hazards, the characteristic of this is they have high probability and more frequently occurring natural hazard, as opposed to a volcanic eruption, which is low probability and low frequently occurring. So the analysis will be different if you look at the other type of hazards. Okay, so what's the incidence of shock caused by these hydrometeorological hazards? About 98%. 98% of total 193 municipalities have experienced this hydrometeorological hazard. And we asked the local government officials, how severe was the shock? So this is perception on their part, okay? About 61% of the municipalities in the sample experienced very severe to most severe. So because this is perception, meaning what they think the severity of the hazard that they experience, we tried to validate their perceived severity using external measure or external and objective measure. And their answers with regards to severity shows dependence on this measures of hydrometeorological hazards. This one is the storm signal, cyclone scale, intensity, and then the peak in kilometer per hour. And also we also did a test for independence. So we're confident that even if we use the perceived severity, it is acceptable and valid. And then we asked them, has the municipality completely recovered? The recall in the survey, where the recall question is, did you experience a shock caused by natural disaster since 2009 for this hydrometeorological? So 2009, and then we conducted the survey in 2016, 2017. So that is the recall. So from 2009 to 2017, we're asking them whether they have completely recovered from the most severe shock. And 67% of them said that they have completely recovered. Note that in the literature, we have this different evolution of recovery in disaster. So this is the part where disaster hasn't happened yet. So it's increasing, meaning over time, the economy and the welfare is improving. And then disaster strike, right? And then again, depending on what you did in the past, right, and what you are doing after the disaster strike, it may be that the trajectory of recovery would be no recovery at all, or your recovery to trend, meaning you're going back to the trajectory as you were before, or it's better than the before, you mean you're building back better. And there is also this area in the literature where natural disaster caused by natural hazard, it creates a creative destruction. So like what happened here in the picture here, they experienced an earthquake, right? So which toppled down the municipality building. So because of that, they were given funds to build their own municipality building. Although we did not see that that building when we did the survey because it's still being constructed. So these are the paths, depending again on what you do. Recovery may take different forms. Okay, so for the 193 municipality, they said that 79% of them said that recovery is actually better than before. So most of them are here in building back better. Okay, so we now go to how did we created the index. So this more or less followed the blocks in the survey instrument, in the questionnaire. We're trying to create first the sub-indices. This may be small. This may be small. For example, here we have employment index, evacuation index, because we have several questions relating to evacuation. So we're creating that sub-index for evacuation index. So this capture all the information. So we developed these several indices for all the risk management activities, including precautionary measures, what they did before, what they did after the response, recovery, rehabilitation, and rebuilding. Again, note that the survey, the ones answering the survey are the local government units. So to be able to create an index, we use a methodology called the principal component analysis and the iterative principal component analysis. Here, we perform the iterative principal component analysis to create that sub-index, meaning which among these sub-indices explain this disaster risk management of a municipality, because all of these questions were asked for each of the municipality. So here is the formula for capturing in one number this localized disaster risk management index using the principal component analysis. The estimated principal component of principal component score of LGU, this one divided by the maximum principal component. The resulting localized disaster risk management index takes into account consideration the impact of weighted contribution of each component. So each of these component here, this one, each of these component in the principal component analysis, this is the sub-indices, okay, which are influenced by high levels of correlation between the predicted scores of sub-indices and the computed localized disaster risk management index. A sub-index has high influence if the absolute value of its correlation to the localized disaster risk management index is greater than 0.60. So after we computed this localized disaster risk management index for each of the municipality, we then we are able to rank among the 193 municipalities, it's not exhaustive because doing the survey is very expensive. So the ranking is only for the 193 municipalities. So here, the municipality of Batangas City in the province of Batangas ranked number 1. So here, the leader, which is Batangas City, implies that they are practicing or implementing 81% of the disaster management strategies captured by the 14 sub-indices. So here, they may not be implementing all, but 81% of the sub-indices, measure of the sub-indices, they are doing. Hence, they came out to be the leader in terms of being well prepared when disaster comes. Now, you may ask, why is there a need to develop this index? Ranking, it's like competition, right? Your competition among the LGUs, but competition in a good sense. The index can aid LGUs in identifying areas of need. So depending on their scores on the sub-indices, they can identify, oh, we're still lacking on this part. And it also helped them understand the link between conditions and outcomes. And then they can, because of these indices, if you are, I did not show it anymore, but we also have the bottom 10. So those bottom 10 can revisit and evaluate their policies. Why are they at the bottom? And compare performance over time with other LGUs. So it will be a healthy competition. Of course, I don't know if you've heard of competitive cities. So this is something like that, except that they are competing on being the most prepared. Okay. Now, the policy implication of this study, while municipalities may be well prepared on their own, so even if they're ranked number 1, recovery is also not guaranteed. It would depend on a lot of things. One is the frequency. If the municipality is frequently visited, let's say by typhoon, frequency and severity of disasters can still negate and constrain complete recovery. One policy implication is the need for identification and designing a cost-effective intervention. Okay, so on average, LGUs that had long-term precautionary measures conducted cleanup operations and restored power and water services have been found to significantly increase the likelihood of their recovery. So this offers a starting point for the local government units to examine their disaster preparedness roadmap and design to ensure full recovery after a disaster strike. Please note that the technique we employed identifies whether LGU are employing, to some degree, the risk management strategies in the list without examining which among the activities matter in their recovery. In another study, we used the same data in another study. We identified the risk management activities that significantly aided in the LGU's recovery. And we found that long-term precautionary measures, conducting cleanup operations, and restoring power and services significantly increase the likelihood of recovery. And I'd like to share with you that study. This is that one. It was published in the Philippine Statistician, and I provided here the link. This is open access. And the data that we use for the survey, so for both of these studies, we also published that in this journal, Data in Brief. This is open access. If you want to conduct the same survey in Indonesia, you may use the questionnaire, the survey instrument, because we also posted it open access. And then the experience of the Philippines and Indonesia can be compared. And that's also a good study in itself. That can be a PhD because conducting a survey might be very expensive. But nonetheless, if you're interested in doing analysis for the Philippines, you can use this data because it's already open access. Note that we only conducted the study for the meteorological hazard, we haven't touched the geologic hazards, the low and the low probability and low frequently occurring hazards. So that would be a good study in the future. Okay, we can now go to the micro part. Am I very fast? Please let me know.
You're good, Maya.
Are we okay? See, so we now go to the micro level. Micro, this would be at the household level. So I will be sharing you two research. So this one, we also did a survey at the household level. This one is really from Yolanda or the Typhoon Haiyan at the household level. We're examining them. So you may have heard, as I've said, this typhoon, super typhoon Haiyan, hurled a massive destruction across the central part of the Philippines. You may have seen some pictures before when it happened. So this is the kind of destruction that Typhoon Haiyan created. It was one of the strongest storms ever recorded with wind speeds of more than 300 kilometers per hour. So that's why the municipality of Tacloban put their dream office, that's as a risk management office, at the very top. Because look at this big boat. It was really hurled across this municipality because that's how it's like a tsunami-like wave that covered the area, especially Tacloban. So we conducted this survey a few months after Yolanda hit. So Tacloban and Leyte is one of the domain of our survey. So we were asking, have the Yolanda affected families already recovered? So this is 6 months after Yolanda. So it's a sort of studying what happened in the aftermath of a disaster. And we're trying to see what are the various coping mechanisms that have employed to aid in their recovery. So again, even though this is at the household level, we're using more or less the same framework, disaster risk management framework as I've showed earlier. The survey was funded by the Philippine Center for Economic Development. And it was really a social protection survey that was conducted in May to June 2014. So a few months after Yolanda. Again, we're trying to investigate this time at the household. The previous survey was at the local government units. It's the same, mostly the same questionnaire, except this applies to household. We did the survey before we did the survey for the local government units. We again use a multi-stage cluster sampling design with a nationally representative sample from 57 provinces. Our idea when we did the survey for local government units is we want to connect the household and the local government unit and see how the risk management and coping strategies between the household, which is the private sector, and the local government units interact, because there may be some crowding out effect that's happening. So it's a waste of resources. So, but we haven't done that. So again, that's a good research avenue for PhD students. Okay, so the focus of this study, it's also a nationally representative survey, but for this particular study, we're focusing only on the 13 severely affected provinces that was identified by NEDA. But the total survey is 3,100, so focusing on the Yolanda affected region, we only had a 1,065 respondents. But as I've said, we made Leyte and Tacloban as a domain of the survey to make the analysis valid, even though it's only 1,065. So because we're focusing on Yolanda, Yolanda is defined as a shock, an unforeseen adverse event that can lead to decreases in welfare. And this, we isolate those who said naturally occurring events experienced in November 2013. to identify with Yolanda. And again, we're focusing on the hydrometeorological disaster, the 4. Here is the economic profile of the household respondents. Here you have your the poorest of the households and then the richest of the household. So it well represented across income groups, our respondents. And when we asked them whether have they recovered, because this is 6 months, so very short, right? So, and again, because the respondents are all income class are well represented, so about 36% still have not recovered after 6 months. So in the aftermath of Yolanda, 36% of the respondents are still feeling the brunt of the super typhoon. With regards to the household perception regarding the impact of their well-being, here they're saying that about partial to full recovery, 19% of the respondents have already experienced partial to full recovery, and about 44% have not experienced any recovery at all after 6 months. And when we ask them about the recovery, we know, again, this is perception because we're asking them, right? So we make sure that they perceive the monetary value of recovery. So when we ask them here, 44% have not recovered. So this is in terms of monetary value of recovery. And then we also ask them about again the coping activities, okay, that they did. In this case, the financial coping activities. Note that the destruction of Super Typhoon Haiyan really washed away all houses, whether it's made of cement or made of wood. It's been really devastated. Okay, so these are the coping activities that they did. I remember that there was cash for work, especially for poor people. But of course, if you are a little well off, you may have relatives, right, where you can borrow, or you can borrow also from the bank, so that's loan. And some people would have cash savings, so they are spending. So it's their way of coping, spending their cash savings. But again, not all families would have cash savings. So among the respondents, so that's the 1,065, only 13% received or sought assistance from the government. So that's the percentage that was captured by the survey. What about precautionary measures? They did something in the past to help cushion the impact of Super Typhoon. So mostly, long-term precautionary measures include savings, asset accumulation, meaning they probably have another house in another area. It's double whammy if the second house is also in that area, because it for sure it's devastated, and other various instruments, insurance that can be drawn upon to cope with disaster. Who are the ones taking precautionary measures? So here, the upper 60%, about 10% of them, meaning the higher income families, are the ones taking precautionary measures. The poor don't have adequate coping strategies, so we cannot expect them to do precautionary measures. It's really expected from the higher income families. And then any learning from past experience. So the data shows that even after experiencing a shock before Typhoon Haiyan, few take precautions. I don't know if you observe this in Indonesia, but in Filipinos, they had experienced a shock before, but maybe we have to do another survey because Super Typhoon is different. Maybe because there are anecdotes that now they are really taking precautions. But for those who did not, perhaps they are too poor to take any precaution at all, right? So that's the situation. There's a rainbow after the rain, always, right? So this is a picture in the Tacloban Airport. So when the storm has settled, so airport was destroyed. So that's why even the relief is difficult to come by. Even the roads have been closed. There was no power. So they were waiting for some military plane to come to the airport for the initial relief. So that's how bad the situation was. So now we try to see what are the factors that influence the recovery in the aftermath. So this is just 6 months after Yolanda happened. So we did here a logistic regression because on the left-hand side, we have the data whether they have experienced full or partial recovery and no recovery at all. And we're trying to explain that using all these ex ante and ex post coping activities that the household have undertaken. So to answer which one have aided in the recovery. So these three, the one that's highlighted are the most significant. For the households that took precautionary measures before Yolanda, the probability of partial to full recovery after the disaster increases by 23 percentage points after controlling for other factors. So meaning this one, 23 percentage points, it helped in the recovery. So again, as we have seen earlier, this may be those families belonging to higher income group. For households with cash savings and utilize such savings, the probability of partial to full recovery increased by about 8 percentage points relative to household without savings. So if this is your coping mechanism, you're trying to save before, and then you spend those cash savings after, so it helps in the recovery. For those households who availed of the loans, so we have here this one, loan availment. For those households, the probability of partial to full recovery increases by about 10 percentage points, controlling for other factors. But we also note that 44% of the households availed of loans from informal money lenders, not from the formal. So this is a one thing, government intervention that came out after Yolanda, because it was difficult to borrow money from the bank because the bank were asking all kinds of identification card. And Super Typhoon Yolanda washed away everything. So they don't even have IDs to show. So the families resorted to informal money lenders. And we know that if you borrow from informal money lenders, they charge a very high interest. So it's a double whammy for them. Okay, so here, household experiencing a similar shock. So it's a double whammy again. The probability of recovery, if you had experienced shock before, decreased by 13.2 percentage points for households who have experienced a similar shock. Okay, and households may have not yet fully recovered from the previous disaster. Here comes Super Typhoon Yolanda. So that's what happened. And then because we're interested in whether government assistance is making a recovery or not, this is what we found. So we interacted household receiving government assistance and those households that are already part of the conditional cash transfer program of the Philippines. These are the assistance for the poorest of the poor, even without disaster. So here, what we found is that the probability of partial to full recovery for households who receive government assistance differs between CCT and non-CCT beneficiaries by 2.2 percentage points, with CCT beneficiaries having positive incremental effects from having received government assistance on average. So this implies that CCT, the conditional cash transfers, also help in the recovery, in the immediate recovery of those disaster-stricken families. So in addition to the objective kasi of CCT, Conditional Cash Transfer Program, is to break the intergenerational inequality, and they are receiving money in exchange for their kids getting vaccinated and going to school. So because they're receiving money, it helped in their recovery. Okay, so the 2.2 is the incremental effect on the probability recovery for receiving government assistance as the status of the household changes from non-CCT to CCT. So we're saying here, it's not that government assistance has a negative effect, but that government assistance may be endogenous and correlated to damage. For non-poor households, the financial impact of Typhoon Yolanda is tremendous, such that the government assistance is not enough to facilitate their immediate recovery. Remember, Super Typhoon Haiyan doesn't choose which families to affect, right? It affected everybody. So for those households in the higher income group, they may have lost a lot. So even if they receive government assistance, it will not be enough for them to go back to the initial welfare level that they have before the shock or before the Super Typhoon Haiyan. Main takeaway from this study is that the most prominent coping activity is taking precautionary measures and asset disposal, or spending cash savings, and taking out loans. It's really hard for poor to prepare for disaster. Disposable assets are low. They need good years to prepare for bad years. And I don't know if you know this singer, Billie Holiday. He said that in one of his songs, that's them that's got shall cope, so the high income families, them that don't shall lose. So the Bible says, and it still is news. Okay. So I have another one. Let me see. This one is short. This one is also at the micro level. Or that paper with Yolanda will be published as a chapter in a book. And this one is still ongoing. We're still completing this study. This one, we're trying to see the impact of extreme weather events on the household welfare in the formal and informal sector. So differentiating the impact in the formal and the informal sector. This is actually a transdisciplinary research because we are doing this with colleagues also from Manila Observatory. So these are those, it's like the weather station, but this one is private. So it's also located in our university, in the compound of our university. Let me see. Okay, the informal versus formal sector. The formal sector, this would be those that are subject to taxation, those who are paying taxes, regulatory law, while the informal sector is largely outside of it. So this would be the informal settlers that you see. Informality aggravates the socioeconomic cost incurred by the household during disasters because they don't have access to health insurance. They don't have access to financial instrument to cope with risk. So disasters can increase the vulnerability of informal households to remain informal, while also increasing the risk that formal households will fall to informality. So climatic changes, especially in Southeast Asia, are expected to result in shifting precipitation. So that understanding the impact of extreme weather events on the well-being of the formal and informal sector is crucial for the appropriate design of policy instrument and social protection. So this ties up a little bit with the Yolanda study because impact of disaster is not uniform across households. Okay, so here in this study, we mean extreme weather events, we mean it to be extreme rainfall days. So we're counting the extreme rainfall days that the municipality has experienced because we were working with the Manila Observatory colleagues, so we are able to get that. So that the objective is to assess and differentiate the impact of this particular particular extreme rainfall days on the welfare of the formal and informal household data using a nationally household representative survey data. The survey data here we did not conduct. This is the one that's officially conducted by the Philippine Statistics Authority. We merged two household survey data, the family income and expenditure survey data, and the labor force survey data. So that's what we use. Here is a measure of this extreme rainfall. Extreme rainfall day, so we define which day has extreme rainfall. When rainfall for that municipality exceeds the 95th percentile of daily rainfall from the average that we have 1988 to 2018. And then we are able to identify municipalities, okay, that are experiencing extreme rainfall above normal if they exceed the 75th percentile of the annual number of extreme rainfall events for each year. So we are using 2005, 2008, 2011, and 2014. Who are the households in the informal sector and how big is the relative informal sector relative to the formal sector? Note that the Philippine Statistics Authority of the country that does not issue official statistical counts of formal and informal households. However, it defines the informal sector as those households and incorporated enterprises. So we use this definition as basis in identifying the informal sector. And you see here that the proportion of the informal sector from 2006 to 2015 has actually gone down from 43% to about 36%. And there is largely an intersection between the informal households and the poor in rural areas. So meaning the informal sector are largely poor and most of them are living in the rural areas. Okay, and if you look at the expenditure and income per capita of households in the formal and informal sector experiencing extreme, this would be lower, always lower than the formal, than their counterpart. And between normal and extreme, they are also lower, meaning that their income, per capita income or expenditure, which is our indicator of well-being. Okay, so what we did here, we used this technique called endogenous switching regression because household faces a choice between becoming informal or informal. The basic approach would be to conduct OLS regression, but if you just use OLS regression, it may lead to a biased estimate because it assumes that informality is exogenously determined, when in fact, it can be potentially endogenous. So to address the endogeneity and selectivity bias in the data, we estimate a switching regression. So here is our welfare indicator. This would either be income or expenditure. The X would be the household characteristics, and the D here would be the disaster event or the extreme number of extreme rainfall days up to 3 years ago, meaning experience in the past may happen with regards to their well-being this time. And this would determine the sector of choice, whether they would be in the formal and informal sector. So the vector of household characteristics that may explain whether they go to formal or informal include sex, age, sphere of age, marital status, and educational attainment of the household head, and also the household size. And the sector selection equation would also include being poor or non-poor and the household characteristics. So all of these things. So this is the result. We pulled the data. So we also conducted OLS just to see whether the sign that we're going to get is correct. And then we did the endogenous switching regression via the full information maximum likelihood estimate. So let me magnify this table because this is very small. So just using OLS, so this one, the estimate shows that informal households have lower income and expenditure after experiencing a disaster. Again, results show that being informal relative to formal sector decreases expenditure and income by around 7%, holding other things constant. What would be the factors that would influence their sector, whether they go to formal or informal sector? So here we see that being poor significantly affects the likelihood. So if the household is full, most likely they will be at the informal sector. Okay, and being considered as urban inversely affects the likelihood that household will be informal. So if you're in urban area, you are likely to be in the formal sector. So what are the effects? Using the endogenous switching regression. Extreme rainfall days significantly lower expenditure of households in the formal and informal sector by 16.2% and 10.6% respectively. So either you use income here and expenditure. So when income is used, the negative impact is slightly bigger. The coefficients of the 2 to 3 year lag, remember we used this year before, 2 years before, and 3 years before. So these are the coefficients of the 2 and 3 year lag extreme rainfall variable. They are all here, they are all negative, okay, and significant, with the magnitude getting smaller the earlier the extreme rainfall, the experience of the extreme rainfall, meaning up to 3 years ago, the coefficient or the magnitude becomes smaller. Here is the picture of that. So this is for the formal line, formal sector. It's more negative. So this is consistent with the results of the household for Yolanda. The solid line, this is for the informal. It's less negative relative to the formal sector. And the slope of the line here can be interpreted as the speed of recovery. So you see here that for the informal sector, it's steeper, meaning that they have the capacity to recover immediately more than or relative to the informal sector. So again, consistent with the results that we get using the households in the Yolanda affected areas, in this case, households in the informal sector has larger income and has more to lose than the households in the informal sector. However, this is the clincher. The adverse impact to the informal households may be irreversible given their weak capability to recover and their limited ability to smooth out consumption even during days with normal rainfall. So even though these informal have experienced lower negative, the lingering effect may be irreversible. So meaning they may forever be in the negative welfare. Okay, now so comparing some concluding remarks for this study, households, regardless of which sector they belong, reels from the negative effects of experiencing extreme rainfall from 3 years ago. Weak capability to recover and the limited ability to smooth out consumption even during days with normal rainfall makes extreme weather events adversely potent for the welfare of the informal sector. Targeted social protection coverage to households near the poverty line can help soften the blow of weather shocks, improving the informal sector access to opportunities for smoothing consumption may be the way forward. Awareness and also education campaign regarding the impact of disasters may matter a lot. So as I've said, this is still an ongoing research and we're trying to finalize the paper for this one. I think I can stop here so we have some time for question and answer.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maha, for the presentation. It's very thorough, yeah, from macro to meso and micro level. It's very interesting. I personally have my own question myself, but I will open it for the audience first. Someone is giving question in the Zoom chat. That is from Bu Nur Aini Hidayati. Bu Nur Aini is one of our lecturer. who Raini is asking, just wondering to know how the strategy to obtain zero depletion by 2040. Thank you. And so another one from Renta, you still, I think this is our PhD student. Renta is asking, some disaster threats come from natural resources and technological failures. Then how should we anticipate first, whether human activities in the economy or technology or natural condition? Because these three things can be a source of sustainable development and become set of disaster. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Maya, you can start and
Yes,
answering.
thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Noor Ani. That's her name. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did not really specify the different strategies to obtain that zero depletion. But one thing, let's say, I know Indonesia has a lot of forest cover, right? So illegal logging may be one thing that degrade. So you may want to put in place, royalty in using those forests, royalty taxes in using those forests. And even we can learn from other experiences of other natural resource rich countries where income from using those natural resources, let's say logging the forest or mining and quarrying, are invested so that when the time comes, okay, the revenues from those investment can be used. So it's like spending your cash savings, except this is in the macro level. So those are some examples of strategies that can be employed to obtain that zero depletion by 2040. And then the second question, what does this mean? Natural resource and technological failures. So actually, in the framework that I showed earlier, we don't really know when a disaster would strike, right? Whether there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's natural or man-made. But somehow we have prior knowledge that some natural hazards may come our way. Like I said, in the Philippines, 20 typhoons, we know that already. So we're expecting. And the most intense usually come in October and November. So that's when especially at the local level, the local officials are cleaning all the sewers so that water would flow. So we don't really know. So that's why we're preparing. We just have some expectation about when they are coming. Did I answer your question, Renta?
Yeah, Nanta, maybe can ask directly if you have further question or to trying to confirm or clarify, maybe, Renta. Okay, Renta is not appearing. Maybe he's already have something else to do. Okay, is there anyone from the audience also want to ask a question? I can give you opportunity to ask directly to Dr. Maha by opening your cam and voice. Okay, maybe I'll go first. Dr. Maha, I'm interested with the loan, factors. So you're looking at the loan after the disaster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you also looking for the loan access before the disaster? Maybe if there's something, is it related? Is it someone who have access to loan after disaster? Is it also the same with people that have access to before disaster?
Yes. Especially, I don't know your experience in Indonesia, like what I've said, to be able to take a formal loan. So those who have access, they need to have like two or three IDs, identification. So, but let's say if you're poor, if you're working in the informal sector, you may not have that ID.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why after that experience with Haiyan, the government now has do away with that identification. And currently, also because of the experience in pandemic, there is this ongoing effort by the Philippine Statistics Authority to have just one ID for all the Filipinos. So it would also be easier to give out, those assistance to those who are really in need. But it's a long way to complete that. But we're already doing it. The Philippine ID system. I don't know if you have that in Indonesia.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Is there anyone else from the audience maybe want to ask a question?
Can I ask Parumayang?
Yes, sir. Sure. No, we will.
Yes.
Let's go ahead.
Okay.